Alrighty. So the last bot in our tune-up checkup for Arcade Edition is Alex. And for those of you familiar or unfamiliar with Alex, he is our air resets and air hit awareness bot. Alex received quite a few changes in Season 3. So, to start with, I'm just gonna look at how he's running on his normal settings here with V-Trigger 1. So the goals for Alex are essentially to punish his jump-ins with an air-to-air or with a anti-air. And then follow up with your reset. To punish DOS boots, which you just saw a little bit there. To punish his sledgehammer, which is obviously going to present some issues with his second V-Trigger, given that he doesn't really have sledgehammer. And that's about it. So we'll have to come up with some change to his goal system for a V-Trigger 2 variant goal. But having gone over this bot a little bit, I don't think it will be that big an issue. So we will definitely post that change once we do a little bit more testing. So let's review AlexBot as he is. As you can see, his ground game is fairly busy, as Alex should be. Alex's specials have a very good way of occupying and closing space. And if you are distracted looking for his jumps, a decent amount of his special moves can basically punish you for, say, going into the air to go air-to-air something if he actually was not jumping, or catching you back on your way down if you jumped too late. And honestly, AlexBot does some of the highest damage out of just his basic stuff than any of our other bots. We didn't put too much focus in making him a damage-dealing bot, but Alex as a character just does a lot of damage. And given that he is a command throw character, if you manage to get in a situation where you are closer to him, you can experience a lot of pain and anguish as you get planted into a tree. So, as you can see, we do have his EX command throw in here for a few reasons, but it's mostly to make sure that if you are close to him, you have to deal with that stress. Now, there's a few other things going on in this bot. For starters, you might notice that he's jumping backwards, which very few of our bots do. This is for two reasons. One is we wanted to have a way to make you have to really pay attention to what Alex is doing when he goes in the air. And we do this in a few different ways. And jumping back is one of them. The other being, as you just witnessed, that knee press that he does to grab you out of the air. He does a forward jump and a few different jump ins. And his timing varies quite a bit on these three things. So you really can't have a solid pattern for predicting when Alex is going to go jump in the air. So getting that randomness was fairly important when we were making this bot. But you cannot neglect your ground game, like, at all, due to the design of Alex's character. He has very nice long buttons that occupy a nice chunk of space. And honestly, he tends to put you in weird spaces due to the way his pushback works on some of his moves and the follow-up that the bot does after those. So I'm going to switch to V-Trigger 2 here. So Sledgehammer makes sure that you can't really pressure Alex too hard, and that you have to pay a decent amount of attention to his ground game. But you don't ever have to worry about moving during his sledgehammer. It is slow enough that you can react with a crouching back and block it and deal with the mix-up there, but you're never really at a huge risk of getting punished for adjusting your footing. What V-Trigger 2 seems to do is it adds that layer to this. If you are standing, as I just demonstrated, he can grab you. But if you are crouching, you're basically immune to it, and honestly, we are still not quite sure how to think about that in terms of the bot itself. That will require a lot more research, but for now, it puts pressure on the way you adjust for your air-to-airs and anti-airs. A big part of air-to-airs and anti-airs is your spacing relative to Alex and what buttons he is pressing. Sledgehammer dealt with this by making sure that if you went forward and tried to stop his moves and keep in that optimal spacing with your medium and heavy buttons, he could just parry those and punish you for it. That is no longer the case in V-Trigger 2, but for starters, his command throw in the V-Trigger 2, if you whiff buttons in neutral, he can grab you pretty easily. And honestly, that's one of the things Alex seems to be better at than a lot of, well, not a lot of, some other grapplers. But if you want to get in this sweet spot here to get your points for air-to-airing and anti-airing, you have to move back. The new V-Trigger, along with the already programmed slash elbow, move Alex so far forward that you have to adjust unless you're planning on doing a neutral jump, which carries its own set of risk. So, knowing when you can move back to adjust your footing becomes a different way you have to think about the problem. So it makes your defensive focus a little more stressed. In V-Trigger 1, the offensive way of keeping up your footsies is put under more pressure. So I like to think of the two as complementary to each other, much like Karim is, in that her second V-Trigger and Alex's second V-Trigger both tend to make you think about the defensive side of what they're trying to teach. While this bot is sort of simple and meant to get you used to things and break your misconceptions about what is possible about a character in terms of their air-to-airs and anti-airs, since it is a bit different in Street Fighter V than some other fighting games. It also was the bot we started realizing, hey, this can actually teach you a nice deal about your style as a player with your character. Because there's a lot of things in AlexBot where there's multiple solutions for the same problem that have fairly equal benefit or outcome. So V-Trigger 2 made me think about this. In V-Trigger 2, you have two ways you can deal with that command throw. You can sort of duck it out and learn your spacings for every position that Alex can have on the screen in terms of how to handle his jump-ins. And that's a fairly tall order for any character, really. And a lot of characters in this game tend to either have really simple solutions to their anti-air game that work in specific spacings and not really much else, but they don't have to think about the option, or they have a tool for every spacing, but they have to think about what tool they're going to use. So the difficulty alone for your character can differ depending on what character you have. But your style, that is a style choice. Do I stand here, well, crouch here, and deal with that mix-up, deal with that EX command throw at close spaces, deal with him in neutral, throw out buttons, make it so that I can't be thrown by this V-Trigger 2? Or do I learn how to walk backward at the right timings to keep and maintain my spacing so that I can be in more optimal positions? I am more so the latter type of person. I don't really like thinking about my anti-airs and air-to-airs too much. But, especially on Bison, it's fairly valid to be taking either path. So overall, we did not see that many changes that needed to happen, despite how many changes Alex has in Season 3. And despite this V-Trigger being a bit different from the first. He, as you can see, still deals a fair amount of damage, still seems to jump and vary his type of jump at a fairly decent amount of randomness. You're still thinking about his ground game quite a bit in either V-Trigger. And while I think personally that our copy of Alex seems to DOS boots a bit less, I'm not really comfortable to say if that would be true on everyone's, since the timing of V-Trigger 2 and his jumps and all that stuff is so tiny but piles up in a lot of ways that it's really hard to tell if it actually affects how often he does that move. But we tend to make these bots fairly well tuned to the rhythm of all of the inputs to make sure that certain things happen at a certain frequency. But honestly, I don't think it's that big a deal given that it definitely still comes out. So it's not like it's blatantly missing from the bot. And V-Trigger 2 definitely seems to still keep to the general idea of what the bot is about. If anything, it adds a layer that helps you understand your spacing, especially in the Alex matchup, a bit more, but also in regards to your air-to-airs, and just getting that muscle memory down of the difference between slash elbow and his V-Trigger command grab. Especially for newer players, it can probably activate like the same set of muscle memory. So it's definitely good, especially if you feel like you had Alex down in Season 2, but haven't fought him lately, just getting used to that alone is probably worth a session or two with AlexBot. Since it's a very similar feeling set of motions. He moves forward at around the same speed. It's still Alex coming at you, this big lug of muscle. But it's a grab, right? So if you just block as if it were a slash elbow and you're standing, that's gonna happen. Anyway, that really is the extent of AlexBot's changes in Season 3. Again, we'll probably come up with some alternative point system for his V-Trigger 2, since one of his points is V-Trigger specific. And you will be able to catch all of that on our Twitter. We'll usually post something at 2_MK_FGC. Or of course, if you don't live in the Twitterverse, all our stuff is at 2-mk.org/bots for these bots, but we also have like katas and stuff for more intermediate level training. But yeah, that is every single character for Season 3 so far. So, with that being said, this is JustVine with 2_MK signing off, and good night.